Good afternoon. My name is Lacey Fontaine. I am the program assistant here at the Charles Lindbergh House and Museum in Little Falls, Minnesota. Welcome to our next Snapshot Saturday series, where we'll be talking with Mike from Living Lands and Waters. Living Lands and Waters is an organization that specializes in the clean Mississippi River. And since we are nestled along the Mississippi, we'd like to know how to help conserve. If you didn't know, Charles Lindbergh was a huge conservationist. He did work in the Philippines and Mexico and even up in the Arctic. He often cited as the Mississippi River to start his love of conservation later in life. We also are paying great attention to our conservation up here. If you didn't know, in 2020, we had a massive mudslide in the back of our house in the historic site that took out our retaining wall. And we are actively losing another structure on the property. So we are trying to learn how to help. And if you didn't know, the environment directly affects our historic preservation. So without further ado, I will introduce Mike from Living Lands and Waters.
You all today about Living Lands and Waters. It's a nonprofit. Primarily, our main focus is river cleanup, environmental group, but we also are involved in tree plantings and also education and invasive species removal as well. The organization Living Lands and Waters was founded 25 years ago by my friend and boss, whose name is Chad Perkracki. Chad, a little bit about his story. Chad grew up right on the banks of the Mississippi River, south of you guys in the Quad City area, like Moline, East Moline area. But literally his parents' house was right on the river. His backyard was the river. He played, he fished on the river, and he worked as a commercial shell diver or mussel diver, diving in high school for mussels with his older brother. And he and his brother would camp on islands up and down the Mississippi River and the Illinois River as well. And it was all this time he spent on the river camping and being, in these remote places that he noticed just how much debris and trash was out there on the islands, on the shorelines, and in the river itself. So at a young age, Chad started to, while he was still in high school, make calls to try to secure funding to start a river cleanup project. And he was told no for a variety of different reasons. They didn't have the funding. What garbage are you talking about? But overall, I also felt, since he was so young, that they were, reluctant to have someone take on such a huge task as cleaning up the Mississippi River. But Chad, didn't give up. He kept this idea alive and kept thinking of ways he'd get this off the ground and running. And it was in college, his roommates had a NASCAR race on TV, and he noticed that NASCAR was, had sponsors. And he thought, well, maybe if I could get sponsors to clean up the river, we could get this thing going. And he kind of ran into a lot of the same obstacles since he was so young. A lot of companies were reluctant for a variety of different reasons, but also because he was young, to give him money to start this project. But finally, he got one sponsor he got an $8,400 grant from a company, and started cleaning up the river by himself. And he got some local newspaper attention, and then through the AP, Associated Press, through that newspaper press clipping of his mission, he got national media attention. And from there, he kind of used that momentum and that attention to grow and build it through a lot of different obstacles and challenges, failures. But initially, Living Lands and Waters was started by one guy in one small John boat, and it has really grown and expanded into a much bigger operation. And in fact, it's known as the only industrial strength river cleanup operation in the United States. And I'm going to kind of show you what that looks like and talk to you more about the organization. So Living Lands and Waters, I want to talk about what we address. The problem that we address is trash, and trash that ends up in our river. And overall, as it comes to addressing this problem of garbage, and one of those things is recycling is great, and repurposing is great, but I think one thing we could all do a better job is reduction of just the amount of trash we produce in a day. We make up 5% of the world's population, but we're responsible for about 30% of the world's garbage. And we make enough garbage every day in the United States to fill up a Major League Baseball stadium from top to bottom twice a day. So proof of this year has been a record-breaking year for us, to give you an idea of the volume of stuff that we collect. Typically, we still collect a lot of stuff, but about a little over 500,000 pounds a year. This year we've crushed that. We removed over 1.5 million pounds of trash this year so far. A lot of that had to do with relief efforts for the tornadoes that came through down south, like Tennessee and Kentucky area, Indiana. We worked on the Tennessee River or Kentucky Lake, the Tennessee River. With our excavator, we have an excavator that we use to remove a lot of demolished docks, housing debris, sunken boats, anything and everything you can think of that come out of a house, all the way to someone's antique Barbie doll collection. But overall, the amount of trash that we've collected as an organization is almost 13 million pounds of garbage since this organization was started by Chad. We've worked on a total of 25 rivers in the United States. So the mission started on the Mississippi, but it's expanded to other rivers throughout the United States. But we do this with a lot of help of volunteers, and we've had over the years over 120,000 volunteers help us to reach these figures, help us to reach these stats. So I think an important thing to talk about when you talk about the trash that we clean up is, how does it get there? And a lot of times people say, well, people dump it in there. And that's true. Unfortunately, people do dump some of this stuff directly in our rivers. But the majority of it, and this is an important thing I think to grasp, is that 80% of the trash that we collect from our rivers starts out just in our city streets on land. And it's our mismanagement of this trash. A lot of it being primarily plastics that don't go away. And even, from overfilling garbage cans to, dumpsters or parking lots with trash that isn't, blows out of there, or animals get into that trash. Then eventually over time that works its way through the watershed into our river systems. People illegally dumping stuff. Over time, after flooding, heavy rains, getting washed down into creeks or stream beds or storm drains, either through flooding or heavy rains, can move this or push this debris into our waterways. Like I said, I go in a lot of times, and these storm drains don't magically go to a landfill or recycling center. Through these storm drains, stuff can get into our watershed, our rivers. But I think it's really important to grasp that really keeping our rivers clean really starts with keeping where we live at in our communities clean, because over time that stuff does work its way into our river systems. And even when these are photos that I've taken, even when you try to do the right thing, like throwing away that plastic grocery bag, this is photos taken from a landfill. You can see these bags, they blow out of that landfill and back in to the watershed, and eventually it can end up in our rivers. And this speaks to the type of trash that I want to kind of emphasize and focus on today, is the problem with the amount of plastic that we use on a day-to-day basis. And this plastic doesn't go away, and the negative impact it has on our rivers and oceans ecosystems. So when you talk about, the Mississippi River watershed, it's one of the world's biggest watersheds. And like I said, most of this trash that ends up in our river system, or our Mississippi River that eventually flows in our Gulf, it starts on land. And when you talk about that watershed, or that land area of the Mississippi River watershed, you're talking about a watershed that's made up of, 31 states and parts of 2 Canadian provinces. So all that stuff that's, from the stuff that we put on our lawn to the trash that's in our communities, to fertilizer and all these things, all this stuff can eventually work its way into our river systems and impact our water quality in those ecosystems. From as simple as, cigarette butts. It's a small thing, and a lot of people think these are organic, they're fine, but the amount of cigarette butts just you see on a city street, that filters out some of the most toxic parts of that cigarette, and they leach out and get into our waterways and affect our water quality and get into our river systems that provide communities with their drinking water. But I want to give you some photos. These are photos of areas that we work in the different river systems and watersheds that we work. And these are photos taken by myself or the crew. This isn't taken from the internet. And this is a backwater channel of the Mississippi River. And this is all water that this stuff is floating in. You can see just all the different plastic bottles, styrofoam, another form of plastic. And this stuff doesn't go away, unfortunately. It stays within our watersheds. It may break down into smaller pieces, it also leaches in toxins from these plastics into our waterways, affecting our ecosystems. And then from our rivers, it gets out, into our oceans. 90% of the trash or plastic that is in our oceans originated from our rivers. And this is the negative impact it's having on our wildlife, not only in our rivers, but our oceans ecosystems. And they estimate that about 1 million seabirds die each year from plastic debris that they confuse as food. This is a decomposed body of an albatross. You can kind of see the bones of this dead bird, but the contents of its stomach that ultimately led to the death of this albatross. And there's so much plastic pollution out there that they estimate that every minute a garbage truck where the plastics are entering our oceans every minute. And a lot of that coming from our rivers. And it doesn't go away, but it breaks down in these small pieces, like this sample taken out from the North Pacific Gyre. This is actually a sample. And you can see all these tiny plastics that then fish and other wildlife confuse as food and consume it. And it can have deadly consequences on this ecosystem. This is contents found in a sea turtle stomach. The ruler is just to denote size, but the plastic debris that was found in the sea turtle stomach. And they estimate 1,000 marine animals die each year due to this plastic debris. Even, marine animals as big as this whale that they found dead on a shoreline. After doing an autopsy, they discovered the cause of his death being all these plastic bags found in this whale's stomach, this gray whale's stomach. And they've talked about, when you talk about just how big this problem has become, a captain by the name of Charles Moore started doing research. He started to see how bad this problem was. And in the North Pacific Gyre in 1999, he found 6 times more plastic particles than zooplankton. This animal that's on the bottom of the food web within our ocean's ecosystem. And just to give you an idea of the volume of this plastic. So with all this plastic being, there's all these, the plastics that you can see, but there's also these microplastics. And if you look at this top left-hand picture of that neon green stuff floating around and within this zooplankton underneath a microscope, that actually is microplastics that this zooplankton confused as food. So not only are fish eating these plastics, but even as small life as zooplankton. So it's getting in that food web and it's bioaccumulating within different animals and within the oceans and our rivers ecosystems. But then it's, magnified at the top of that food web because these other animals like killer whales are eating these other things that have plastics in them. The amount of plastic, the latest study I saw that about 25% of all fish in the oceans, they're finding microplastics within their stomachs. And it's about, I think, 12.5% within our river systems. So in 1999, there were 6 times more plastic particles than zooplankton. By 2014, 15 years later, it increased, Captain Moore found, to be more than 100 times more plastic than plankton within this North Pacific Gyre area. That's how much this problem has increased when it comes to plastic pollution within our ecosystem. So I want to address kind of just, I'm very conscious of this, but I think we can there's a lot of room for improvement when I talk about reduction. And these are just some numbers, but just an example is like styrofoam coffee cups. This doesn't go away. Styrofoam doesn't really get recycled and it lasts forever. And then it breaks down in these small pieces. But this is just in a year, 25 million styrofoam coffee cups. And there's a lot of things that we can do, but just to be conscious and think of ways to reduce our plastic using reusable containers, coffee mugs, water bottles, and to kind of address this issue like bottled water, which in my opinion is one of the biggest hustles maybe out there. You know, 64% of bottled water is simply tap water, you know, then maybe it's sent through another filter and put into a bottle and then sold to you for a lot more money. It's a huge industry. It's a money maker. And a lot of this filtration that, you know, this bottled water is getting is just through, you know, municipal water systems and then put in a bottle, sold to for money in this plastic bottle that unfortunately a lot of these are not getting recycled. And it's estimated that in 2018, $31 billion was spent on bottled water. It's another little fact that I researched that bottled water costs between 250 to 10 times as much per gallon as tap water. Now, does our tap water infrastructure need improvements? Yes, but the cost of that would be a lot cheaper than what we spend as Americans on bottled water. Another thing about bottled water too is that this plastic that it comes in, these plastics, you know, break down. There's microplastics that break down from the the transportation process, and it's sitting for a while. And people that just strictly drink bottled water are consuming a lot more microplastics opposed to those that drink tap water. And another thing it's important to realize is that the standards for tap water are actually higher than bottled water. The standards are set by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, when it comes to tap water, and they are established by the FDA when it comes to bottled water. But actually, the bottled water companies kind of do their own testing, and then they give those test results to the FDA. So you have to also trust that these companies are, you know, on the up and up when it comes to the testing that they do for the water that they're making and putting in bottles for us. And just once again, talk more about plastic, you know, just a simple thing like straws. You know, 500 million straws are used every day. And if you laid those end to end, that would circle the globe 2.5 times. I could go on and on to list these different examples of what I believe is our overuse of plastic on a day-to-day basis. But we just need, I think it's just important to be conscious, you know, to think about plastic bags. You know, we can use reusable bags or paper bags, or there's different and better options. And I think it's just about, you know, being aware of this problem and then being conscious and trying to change our behavior and habits. You know, from these convenient K-cups, you know, they put these plastic, you know, instead of using reusable filters that these K-cup machines have, people use these little K-cups because they're convenient, but the amount of plastic that gets thrown away, you know, just in 2014, the amount of these little K-cups that were sold could have circled the globe 10.5 times from that were disposed of. So, you know, thinking about the packaging that stuff comes in, because this is what we're seeing. Like I said, these are photos of actual places that we've worked and just how bad this plastic pollution is. This photo here was taken in a backwater channel in Memphis, Tennessee. And I want to show you, this is kind of a before picture. So is overwhelming and almost like paralyzing this problem can seem. This is the city. They're removing stuff from land, but you can see this stuff floating in the background. We've been working there the last 11 years with college students and local high school students. And that location that used to look like this now looks like this. So when you get a lot of people together and you just start, you know, chipping away at stuff, you can make an impact. You can make a difference. But what we do is reactive. And I think it's important that as a whole, as a society, we need to be more proactive and think of ways to reduce or prevent this stuff from ever ending up there in the first place, obviously. But these are just more photos of just the extent of the trash, the plastic debris that we see. And as an organization, we try to engage a lot of our sponsors and employees, community members. Like I said, we work with over 120,000 volunteers, and we go out and work with groups to collect this trash from our shorelines and our rivers. And then we have these john boats. We have 5 of these 30-foot john boats that can hold easily, thousands of pounds of weight. And we take these boats and then take it back to our barges, which I'll show you. But we also have heavy equipment like this crane that allows us to remove bigger things like this camper, this combine. What we use primarily now, though, is this excavator that John Deere, one of our sponsors, donated to us to get debris that we couldn't get before from heavy barrels, full of mud or water, to cars. We just got done working in Cincinnati working with local police to remove over a dozen cars from the river to sunken boats. But this equipment obviously allows us to really amplify our efforts. There's no way we would have got the 1.5 million pounds without this piece of equipment here. It was really instrumental in our work after the tornadoes that ran through Tennessee and our work on the Tennessee River this year. Once again, just our excavator at work. We do try to recycle as much of the stuff that we collect as possible. We do events where we have volunteers sort through the bags of materials that we collect. You can see all these bags in the background on these tables here. You can see these are volunteers sorting through these materials to sort out what can be recycled and what cannot. We recycle all our tires, all our scrap metal. And then usually at the end of the year, just what we don't have time to do to sort through, or the stuff that's not recyclable, will go to a landfill. So this is our operation. When I talk about the size of it, we now have just 3 barges. We had to get rid of a couple of our barges. This barge with the excavator is actually getting turned into, as we speak, another floating classroom. The barge with the green roof, this is our living quarters that we live on 7 months as a crew out of the year, on and off. It also serves as a floating classroom. So in conjunction to doing cleanups, we also do workshops and hands-on river education. And then these other barges are where we store and collect the trash that we find every year. You'll notice we got solar panels on our house barge to cut down on our emissions and also save us in fuel cost. We've got 2 towboats. We've got our bigger towboat that pushes our whole rig, and then we have a smaller towboat that will operate just on its own, pushing just this excavator barge that can work separately away from all these other barges. Like I said, this is part of our fleet, our boats. That's our towboat up close. That was all done by spray paint. We recently just got rid of this towboat. They were in the process of updating a new towboat, but a really, really cool paint job. That was all done by spray paint by graffiti muralists out of St. Louis. It's another photo of our barges. And then the inside, like I said, we have a classroom. This is the inside of that living quarters. Part of it is this classroom where we do hands-on education related to river stuff. This is just some of the toys we found on a shelf within that classroom. This is my room on the barge. So we all have our own space that we live on. Like I said, we're on here 7 months out of the year, on and off. But we do bring students out that do workshops, also help. A lot of times these kids will do cleanups in the areas that we're at. But we'll do water testing with them, do activities about, reduction, use, and recycling activity. And all these workshops are free. And we even have money to provide scholarships for buses or subs. So schools that, lack funding, which a lot of them do, unfortunately, to come out and give their kids the opportunity to do these hands-on workshops. This is them looking at macroinvertebrates as bioindicators for water quality, a sustainability game where they compete as fishermen, and you talk about the problems of overfishing, just more water quality testing. And then another big part of what we do is just connecting students with the river. Chad is a perfect example of someone. It wasn't necessarily that he learned about the importance of rivers in school, but he learned about it and was connected to the river, and his love of the river is just it being his backyard, and making these young people to appreciate, the natural beauty and the adventure of the rivers. You think about, the Amazon, but we have this really cool, awesome river ecosystem, right by you that a lot of times I think we take for granted, not only as a place to explore, but, provides us, with drinking water. Mississippi River provides 20 million people with their daily drinking water. So this is us going out, the Boys and Girls Club, doing some canoeing. And then we also have our Million Trees project. This project, we have our own nursery, and then we also purchase trees from another nursery, some other nurseries, and we distribute over 100,000 primarily oak trees a year to be planted. And we're up 1.7. This is our nursery of oaks that we manage, and this is where we get some of the trees that we give away for free throughout the Midwest. And then just some fun stuff. You never know what you're going to find out there. Four-wheelers, hot tubs, porta potties, old bikes, power wheels, canoes. On the left, you have a message in a bottle. On the right, you have a prosthetic leg. There's actually been 13 prosthetic legs found over the years. And then, from a guitar, helmets, football pads, home plate, radar gun, an actual, we found this toy, but someone had zip tied this toy rat to this horse. It's just kind of an interesting find. Bowling balls, which actually some of them float. Fun fact, if they're 12 pounds or lighter. Bowling balls, some of them will float. Toilet seats, clown shoes, to even, this is probably one of the crazier finds, a mortar shell from the Civil War that was found in Paducah, Kentucky. So I guess at this point, is there any questions? Any questions? Okay. I did want to show one last thing as far as this goes. Is, for anyone curious, we're on social media at Living Lands and Waters on Facebook and Instagram, and our website is at livinglandsandwaters.org if you want to check that out. How to get involved if you want to donate to what we do. But these are just where to check us out, Living Lands and Waters. And we're both on Facebook, Instagram, and we're just at livinglandsandwaters.org is our website. Let's see. Any questions at all? I was going to show another video to give you the scope of our operation, but anyone with any kind of questions or comments? All right, I'm going to show this video really quickly.
My name is Chad Bergracki, and since 1997, I've been on a mission to clean up America's rivers. And as we know, the world's oceans are becoming completely filled with trash. And 90% of all the garbage in our oceans came out of rivers. That mission became Living Lands and Waters, an organization dedicated to cleaning up America's rivers. But when I say cleaning it up, I mean exactly this. Removing thousands of barrels, thousands of tires, thousands of appliances, not just boatloads anymore, but barge loads. Living Lands and Waters is the only river cleanup operation like it in the world. And we worked on 24 rivers in 21 states. Not only do we remove it, but we also sort it out for proper recycling and disposal. We're a small crew of 10 people working on a massive problem. But good news, We've been able to work side by side with over 100,000 volunteers to reach our goal of removing 10 million pounds of trash. But we still need your help. The rivers need your help, and the oceans need your help. Last year, for every $20 donated, we were able to remove 7 pounds of garbage. Help us reach our goal of removing over 1 million pounds in 1 year. Simply put, with your help, we can make the world a better place. Living Lands and Waters, coming to a river near you.
Okay, great question. What is the weirdest thing we ever pulled out of the river? So some crazy stuff. We pulled out before I even started. I know, and I've been working 15 years, but I know one time they found a horse's head wrapped in saran wrap in a cooler. We found actually up in Minneapolis, this is also before I started, they found a surveillance tape from a bank robbery. So that was kind of weird, or not weird, but kind of crazy. And the tape was still protected, so Chad turned it into the police. So that was an interesting find. And then I think on the other side of the bridge in Minneapolis, there's like empty money bags too, old safes, like a pig's head, so those are some of the weirder things. Any other good question? That mortar shell was pretty crazy too from the Civil War. Anything else? That's a classic. That's an awesome question. Some other stuff that's maybe, I don't know if it's appropriate. You find some weird items out there. That's a great question. How often do you do community river cleanups, like getting the community involved and joining you in the cleanup? So I think the best way we engage the community now is like when we do these workshops, they have the option to do, if it's feasible, if there's a need for it, the students to come out and help. We still do. We have our GMRC, Great Mississippi River Cleanup project. So we originally would go to all these different cities and be a part, but now we've kind of had established this Adopt a River Mile program, or this GMRC, where other people, we give the supplies and we help facilitate it, because just the fact that we can't be everywhere at one time. So that's another cool option we have, that we'll give you the supplies and gear that you need to facilitate your own cleanup in your community. We still do, we'll check our calendar. We do still do community cleanup events, but our schedule is just, it's hard to, like, sometimes our schedule would change if there's like some big storm or there's a need for us to go somewhere else. And we still clean up on the Mississippi. We do a lot of work in Memphis and still do like spot cleanups on the Mississippi, but we've been spending a lot more time on the Ohio. The Ohio River is just really, really dirty. So we spent a lot of time doing some work there in the past few years. Still do work on the Mississippi, still do a lot. Like I said, usually start a year in Memphis, and then we do a lot of cleanups where we don't necessarily have our barges, but we just bring our john boats. Good question. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike, for coming on here and educating us about what conservation is like in the cleanup of the Mississippi River. What is the biggest thing that local communities can do to help preserve rivers?
That's a great, there's a lot. I just think of being aware of conscious of what a watershed is, and protecting our rivers really starts with what we do on land in our communities, and understanding that. And then, um, you know, organizing even this neighborhood cleanups, and also just thinking of ways we can reduce our use of plastic. Because from our perspective, for what we do, the tangible things we pick up, it's the plastic pollution is the biggest challenge. Now there's a lot of other challenges that face the river when it comes to like fertilizer runoff and pesticides and all this other thing. So, like I said, being conscious of that and understanding the concept of a watershed and protecting our waterways starts with how we manage the land. But from what we do, just the plastic pollution, and thinking of ways we can reduce our everyday use of plastic, or better ways to repurpose or recycle these materials.
Awesome. This presentation will live on our website for a long time. So if you know anybody who might be interested in river cleanup or getting in contact with this organization, please share it with them. And yeah, thank you again so much, Mike, for coming on and talking to us about this. Incredibly important to somebody in the comments. Thank you. And for our next Snapshot Saturday, you can join us on December 10th, and we'll be talking about Ann Morrow Lindbergh. So thank you again.
Thanks. And just last thing, just if anybody has any follow-up questions, I'm just Mike at livinglandsandwaters.org. Feel free to email me, and I can, if you have more questions about getting involved or any other questions about the organization, I'd be more than happy to answer them. All right. Well, thanks.